Welcome back to Buckeye Country Cooks. Today we're going to be making one of my dad's favorite desserts, no-bake Mississippi mud cookies. This is a dessert that I used to make for Dad a lot when I was growing up. My mom taught me how to make these, and my cousin used to make them too. So let's start with a list of ingredients. You're going to need 2 cups of white granulated sugar. You will need 3 to 4 heaping tablespoons of cocoa powder. I use Hershey's. You will need 1 teaspoon of good vanilla. It smells so good. Make sure you get good vanilla, get real vanilla. Then you will need 1/2 cup of whole milk. Then you will need 2/3 cup of creamy peanut butter. I use Jif. I use creamy. I've never used nutty or crunchy. I always use the smooth peanut butter. And then you will need 2 cups of the quick cook oats. You got to make sure they're the quick cook so they will cook within a minute or two. So make sure it's the quick cook. 2 cups is what I have. 2 cups of quick cook oats. Okay. So now let's move over to the stove and we're going to combine all this ingredients and get started on this recipe. Okay, I forgot to tell you, you also need 1 full stick of salted butter. Okay, we're going to start by putting our stick of butter in our saucepan. And we're going to turn our burner on medium heat, medium to low. I turn it on my lowest medium heat, which on my cook stove, that's 4. Don't ever throw these away because you can use them to grease cookie sheets and stuff. So I'm going to stick this over here. I'm going to add my 2 cups of sugar once this gets melted. I'm going to let this melt. I let it kind of come to room temperature first, but I'm going to melt the stick of butter. And you can cut it up into smaller portions to help it melt a little quicker, but you don't want to melt it too fast because you don't want to burn it. Okay, so you don't want to burn it, so don't cook it too fast. But just let this kind of melt. Let it get good and melted. I'm making these for our family Christmas party, which is tomorrow night on Christmas Eve. I've already made fudge and crock pot candy, and I'm going to be making pecan tassies. When my sister gets here, we're going to be making pecan tassies. So, or a pecan pie. Probably pecan tassies. I haven't decided yet, but probably pecan pie. I don't know. Who knows? But we'll be doing that recipe together. It'll be our first recipe that we've done together. I'm going to turn this up just a little bit. Turn my heat up. As you can see, my butter's melting, but I don't want to get it too hot, because I'm going to put all my ingredients in there together so that can incorporate. This is a dessert that I used to make for my dad all the time when I was growing up, when I got old enough to cook, because you didn't have to bake them. Of course, Mom always helped us with the melting of the butter and the cooking until I got old enough I could do it myself. And I love to make this for my dad because he loved it. And now I make them for my husband because he loves them. Because he asked me what dessert I was making for him this year. So I told him, I said, well, just what do you want? And he said, I want the oatmeal cookies, the oatmeal chocolate cookies. And so I knew he was talking about the Mississippi mud cookies is what we call them. That's what we called them growing up, was Mississippi mud cookies. So that's what I'm going to make. And we're going to have a house full tomorrow night. Going to have a house full. So, okay. So my butter is not completely melted, but it's almost melted. So I'm going to go ahead and add my sugar, my 2 cups of white sugar to my 1 stick of butter. And I'm going to stir that up. And I'm going to stir that together. And I'm going to go ahead and pour my 1/2 cup of whole milk. Pour that in there. I'm going to go ahead and add my teaspoon of vanilla. Good vanilla. Good vanilla. And I'm going to stir that around. Get it mixed really good. Get all that sugar dissolved into that butter and that milk mixed together. Over that medium heat. Got that pretty well mixed in. So now I'm going to add my 4 heaping tablespoons of cocoa. My husband said make them chocolatey. So you can use 3 to 4, but I used 4. Okay, depends on how chocolatey you like your cookies. So I used 4 heaping tablespoons of Hershey's cocoa. I grew up, that was all my mother ever used. I've never used any other kind of cocoa. I'm sure there are other brands of cocoa powder out there, but I've never used it. I've always used Hershey's. So we're going to stir this all till it's well combined. And you're going to want to get it stirred really good, because you don't want it to burn. You don't want it to stick. That's why you don't want your burner too high. It's going to make all this chocolatey goodness. It's going to turn that sugar and that butter and that vanilla and that milk into chocolatey goodness that we're going to add our oats to, our quick cook oats. Again, make sure you get the quick cook oats, okay? If you don't want the ones that you got to cook, and you want to make sure, once you get this all, you make sure it's combined, stir it from the bottom, scrape your spoon or whatever, and I always tap mine to make sure I get the extra cocoa powder in there. Don't want to leave out any of that cocoa goodness. So I think I've got it pretty well mixed up. Okay, so now I'm going to let this come to a rolling boil. Because you want it to come to a rolling boil, and it won't take long. You don't want it just to bubble. You want it to come to a rolling boil. Once it hits a rolling boil, then we're going to set the timer. We're going to cook it for 2 minutes, okay? And I'm going to keep stirring it. I'm going to turn my heat up just a little bit so that it can get to that rolling boil stage. But you don't want to turn it up too high because you don't want to burn it. So I'm just going to keep stirring every now and then. I have cocoa all over my stove, my glass cooktop stove. My sister should be here anytime. You'll probably hear her coming in. So we're going to let that come to boil a little bit. It smells so good in here. It smells so chocolatey. That chocolate and that vanilla, that good vanilla, is so good. It makes it smell so, so good. So, so good. But you want to make sure you got your cocoa mixed up really, really well. And so now we're just waiting for it to come to a boil. Like I said, you don't want to rush it. You don't want to rush this. And it looks like it may be starting. I used to, when I was growing up, I cooked on a gas stove. Well, out here where we live, we don't have gas because we live out in the country and we don't have propane. Our house is all electric. So I don't have gas. And so it really took a long time for me to learn how to cook on an electric stove after my husband and I got married. Because even before I met my husband, I cooked on a gas stove. So now it's starting to boil. And you don't want just a simmer. You want that rolling boil. But you want to stir it because, like I said, you don't want it to You don't want it to burn. And it's getting windy outside. You can probably hear the wind through my Vent-A-Hood. We don't have any trees in our backyard, so we don't have a whole lot of wind block. And so it comes, when the wind starts, it comes through pretty well. It comes through pretty good, at a pretty good clip. So, okay, I'm gonna turn my heat up just a tad more because we've still not reached that boiling point yet. And I need it to boil. And it's starting to boil. I don't know if you can see that or not. I'm gonna turn my camera down so you can kind of see that it's starting to boil, but it's not at that rolling boil yet. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna stir it a little bit. And it should start, any minute it should start boiling. I have my little iPad. I have all of my recipes that I learned growing up on my iPad. Turn it back up just a little bit so you can see me. Oh, we got a boil going on. Yep, we got that boil going on, but it's not quite at a rolling boil. So I'm gonna stir it again. You want to stir it every now and then because you do not want it to burn. And I'm even, once it hits that rolling boil stage, I'm still going to stir it because I don't want it to burn. So, and we are almost there. Okay, we are at that rolling boil stage. Can you see how it's bubbling up there? So I'm gonna set my timer for 2 minutes. And we're gonna let this cook for 2 minutes. Once it reaches that rolling boil stage, you wanna cook it for 2 minutes. So I've set my timer for 2 minutes. You wanna stir it while it's boiling because you don't want it to burn and you don't want it to stick. Make sure you scrape the sides of your pan. But it's at that rolling boil, and then we're going to cook it for 2 minutes because if you don't cook it long enough, they're not going to set up. Okay? So you can see we got that rolling boil going on. See those bubbles? And if you make these with your kids, you don't want them to help you with this stage because when we get finished with this, we're going to move over. We're going to put the oats in it, but it's going to be really, really hot. We're going to put the oats and the peanut butter in it, but it's going to be really, really hot. I used to have all of my recipes written in hand in a recipe book, but we had a house fire about 2 years ago and we lost everything. And so I contacted friends and family and got the recipes back, and so I have put them on my iPad now so that I can just pull them up, put them on this little handy stand that my daughter's got me one year for my birthday or Christmas. And I'm going to turn this heat down just a little bit. Got about half a minute left, and I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to keep stirring because I do not want them to burn. I do not want it to burn, so I'm going to keep stirring it while it's in this rolling boil stage. We're almost reached the 2 minutes. And when I get done with this, I'm going to dip these out on, okay, our timer's done. So I'm going to turn our timer off, and I'm going to turn our heat off. And I'm going to stir it some more. Now, with an electric stove, your heat never stops completely when you turn your burner off, unlike a gas stove. So, I'm just going to stir it a little bit more. Okay, and while I'm going to add my 2/3 cup peanut butter while it's nice and hot. And I use this pushing measuring cup from Pampered Chef because it helps me get all of my ingredients out. And peanut butter, if you've ever used peanut butter, you know it's hard to get out. So I'm going to mix that up in there. Mix that good creaminess up in there. Oh, it's good and hot. It makes the cookies so creamy when you add that good quality peanut butter. And I use Jif. But you can use Great Value from Walmart. You can use any kind of peanut butter that you like. You could probably even make this sugar-free I've never made it, but rather than the granulated sugar, you could use Swerve. And you could use like sugar-free peanut butter. Oh, it smells so good. Okay, I've got my peanut butter almost mixed in. You just keep stirring it. And that while it's hot, it melts that peanut butter. Now I'm going to get my oats. My 2 cup of quick cooked oats. I'm going to put in there. Because this is how the oats get cooked. When you mix them around in this chocolatey, ooey gooey goodness while it's still in the saucepan. This is what cooks your oats. Because this mixture is so hot, and that's why it is important to have your quick cook oats. Okay, you gotta have your quick cook oats, otherwise it won't set up. Oh, it looks so good. Get them all mixed around there together. And that's what cooks your oats. So good. So, now that I have this, I'm going to take this over to my surface and I'm going to scoop them out onto my parchment lined cookie sheets. Okay, so now I've got my parchment lined cookie sheets and my hot mixture. Now, if you didn't want to do cookie sheets, you could just probably put your parchment on your counter. Do them that way, if that's what you wanted to do. And when I do these cookies, to scoop them out, I use a 1/4 cup measuring cup. Usually makes about the right size cookie. Oh, it smells so amazing in here, y'all. So you just get you a scoop out, and then I just eyeball them. Because these are so rich, you really don't want a big old gloppy cookie. You want ones that are, pretty easy to handle, but it smells so good in here. So good in here. So I'm using this scoop, and I'm doing about 1/2 scoop per cookie. And then once these cool, they will set up and be ready to eat. And you can leave them sitting on the counter, or you can put them in the refrigerator. Which the refrigerator is probably what I will do. I will probably put them in the refrigerator so they can set up faster, because I need my counter space for the rest of the cookies and stuff that I have to make tonight. But see how easy that was? And these are no-bake Mississippi Mud cookies. Because you don't have to bake them. You do everything on the cooktop. And if you want them bigger, you can do bigger. If you want them smaller, you can do smaller. But they are, like I said, they are extremely rich cookies, because you have 2 cups of sugar, and then you have the peanut butter, and then you have the whole stick of butter. That's a lot of butter. But you know what they say about butter? Butter makes everything better. And see, I'm just scooping them out. My husband's going to be tickled. I'll do good to keep him out of these until tomorrow night, till we have our family Christmas. I started to say Thanksgiving, but we've already done Thanksgiving, haven't we? But you just continue to scoop them out onto the cookie sheet. And they're actually already starting to set up, believe it or not. But the parchment paper makes them easy to come off. Just let them set up. You could use wax paper if you wanted to use wax paper. You could use wax paper. I use parchment paper. I use parchment paper for a lot of my recipes when it involves candy and stuff like that. There we go. Okay. Getting these cookies in there. They're going to be so good. My husband's going to be so happy. That's quite a few cookies. I'm going to try to squeeze one in over here. And I'm going to try to squeeze one in right there. And that's pretty much it. I don't know if I can get that out of there or not. I'm probably not going to be able to get all of that out of there. So unless I use one of these smaller. You can also use a tablespoon if you wanted to do this. You could use a tablespoon instead of your cup. You could use a cookie scoop if you wanted to use a cookie scoop. But there they are. So now we just wait for them to cool. Okay, here are the Mississippi Mud cookies, and they're all set. So you can pick them up. I already broke that one, but see, they pick up and hold. So they're set. So go make you some Mississippi Mud cookies.